Time now for Back Pages. Tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you your first look at the sports stories in the morning newspapers. And we're doing that this time with the Mirror's chief football writer, John Cross, and the football editor for The Sun, Charlie Wyatt. Welcome to both of you. Quickly run through some of the back pages, then we'll have a chat. Here's the Telegraph Sports Supplement. They lead with Edu, the headline. Arsenal lose Edu in Forest coup. They also carry new United head coach Ruben Amorim's comments. Amorim win and fans will call me Fergie. More on that in just a second. Back page of The Guardian also lead with Edu's shock departure. They've got a revealing interview as well with the former England captain Steph Houghton. I felt let down. Houghton on an unhappy end to her England career. The Express lead with Amorim's quotes about Sir Alex Ferguson on their back page, along with Edu's exit. And they've got that dramatic Monday Night Football you might have seen with us on Sky, an image of Fulham's added time match winner, Harry Wilson. And in the Times, Edu walks out on Arsenal, a line from Danny Kerr as well. I wish I'd spoken up, but we were living in fear of Eddie Jones. So let's talk to our guests, and we'll start with Ruben Amorim's press conference ahead of Sporting's Champions League tie deliciously against Manchester City. The Express leads with that story. Let's have a look at their coverage of that. I am not the new Fergie, says Amorim, having to start playing down expectations already, John Cross.
Oh, yes, he will be if they win tomorrow night. It's great, isn't it? I really like this guy already, Ruben Amorim. He's full of charm. He speaks great English. And I did see that Gary Cottrell, Sky's ever willing press conference operator, brilliant entertainment, always asking really good questions. Tried to get him out to answer in English, just as foreign journalists do here, to get them to speak their native tongue when foreign managers come over to work in England. He wouldn't oblige, but he still came up with great sound bites. And I do think we're going to really like this guy. I think he's going to be a staple diet of back pages tonight, because I do think he's going to deliver it. He just seems fun. He's a smile on his face. He likes to entertain. He knows what makes a headline as well. And here he's just basically saying, if I win, if I lead Sporting to victory over Manchester City and Pep Guardiola, who he described as the best manager in the world, along with lots of other platitudes about the City boss, and quite rightly so, basically that's going to raise expectations to such a level that they're going to suddenly United fans are going to have realistic expectations, suddenly start calling me Fergie and beyond, and expect miracles even before I start. Frankly, I do think that United fans are going to expect a lot from this guy. He's worked wonders at Sporting Lisbon. He's got a real charisma. He's got a real passion. He's got fantastic sound bites in his press conferences. I think, Nick, we're going to have a lot of fun with him, and I really like his kind of back pages already. I
think we definitely are. Just want to show you actually John's paper, The Mirror, and their treatment of this story. The air dryer, if you follow that, taking us back to Fergie and all those comparisons, and also, of course, a rivalry with Pep Guardiola, Charlie, as well. There's so many strands to this.
Yeah, there are. And, as John said, he's going to be great value. I had 4 days in Lisbon last week. I was there for 3 of his press conferences. The first 2, one of which was with Gary. He's answered in English. And then the third one on Friday night, he was clearly told not to speak English anymore. And he was in Portuguese. And I think that's going to continue after the game tomorrow as well. And after his last game as Sporting coach in Braga on Sunday. But what's interesting about him, that he's not just answering questions, he's offering anecdotes and stuff up. I think he will talk himself into trouble. He doesn't criticise referees, or certainly hasn't done in Portugal. But I think when he gets going, he's certainly going to be enormous fun. And that makes him more than welcome for the Premier League, because we've got some great managers in the league, but 1 or 2 of them are a bit dull. And this bloke coming in certainly is not dull.
Who could you possibly be? Yeah, Sky's Gary Cottrell had another go today at getting him to speak in English, and he wasn't having it. This is just on the top of my head. It occurred to me, John, as you were talking earlier and describing his traits, there's an element of the Jurgen Klopp, thinking back to when he arrived, and a guy who's done well abroad, come in here, got a sense of humour. A lot of what you were saying, I thought that's Jurgen all over again.
Yeah, I think you're right, Nick. I think it strikes me as more Jurgen Klopp than Jose Mourinho, because when Jose Mourinho, breezed into his kind of welcoming press conference at Stamford Bridge that time, called himself in his typically arrogant style the special one, and demanded respect straight away with it, really, and probably commanded respect with it. I don't think we're going to get that, but I do think we're going to get a charmer. I do think we're going to get someone who realizes that basically, to him, speaking to the fans, through the media is going to be important to get his message out there, to entertain, to, it doesn't count so much really with the likes of Liverpool, Man United, does it? But it does at some clubs, that a manager really has to speak well I think in the modern time to kind of make themselves relevant, to make their clubs relevant, and to make sure the club stays on the back pages. Man United are always guaranteed to be on the back pages, and Amorim definitely speaks into that. I really like it. I've seen some of his football in Europe, across European competition. He likes to entertain. It's not perhaps as expansive as some managers here, but it's incredibly well organised. He's incredibly well coached, and I do think he's going to entertain us. I really do think this guy is going to actually sort of kind of seize on the big Premier League expectations of delivering headlines and sound bites, and I think he's going to really sort of play into that. And this verbal jousting, I love it with Gary today, which you touched on. I mean, is great. You could see that he was laughing. You could see that he was enjoying it. He probably wanted to, offer that sort of kind of sound bite in English, but had clearly been told not to. But honestly, English, or a lack of sort of kind of English, is certainly not going to hold him back when he speaks to the media here in Premier League press conferences.
One of the issues he may have to deal with is highlighted in The Sun. Charlie, belly flop, the headline. Joshua Zirkzee hasn't achieved an awful lot so far for Erik ten Hag, and a suggestion that A, ten Hag didn't really want him, and B, he was far too heavy.
Yeah, great story by my colleague Neil Custis, saying that, he arrived at the club a stone too heavy. Signed for 36.5 million from Bologna, and Neil writes that it's taken him a long time to get back to the desired weight. Neil also writes that Ten Hag didn't want Zirkzee. It was basically Dan Ashworth on the football side at Ineos that recruited him. They thought he was good value. But I think many of us, even when United first signed him, looked at the fact that he scored 14 goals in 58 appearances from Bologna. So it was very much sort of a work in progress. And he's really struggled, hasn't he? He really has. He's made 4 starts in the Premier League this season out of 12. Looks way off it. Had a chance the other day, and was nowhere near against Chelsea, was he? So far, that does not look to be a good piece of business.
Let's talk about Arsenal and Edu. John Cross, very much your beat. Did you see this coming? Because I don't think many others did.
I didn't really, I'll be perfectly honest. I mean, you might remember the sort of kind of stories first surfaced about interest from Forest, and Marinakis is the Forest owners' staple of clubs. It's sort of kind of late in the summer, really, and so I guess it's sort of been on the radar. Terrific scoop by Sammy Mokbel on the Daily Mail, and a lot's been written and said, and before the day has played out, he handed in his notice. The club statement said, I do think the kind of the club and people close to it, sort of Edu, expected it and have expected it in the last, say, 2 or 3 weeks. So I don't think it's come as a complete, utter shock to those on sort of the inside. But, it was a hell of a story, really. And I do think it's significant, and I think it's far more significant than your average kind of sporting director leaving, even the biggest of clubs, even a kind of a Liverpool, Man United, simply because he used to play for Arsenal, was part of the Invincibles, and a close relationship with Mikel Arteta. He's the guy that was at the club when they brought in Arteta in 2019. He's the guy that's overseen transfers of the like of Odegaard and Declan Rice. And so I do think that he's bigger, shall we say, than your average sporting director. It has shocked me that he's taken the job. I mean, honestly, I'm staggered because in the summer is when Arteta re-signs the contract, signs a new deal to stay at Arsenal. Edu is making all the right noises about sort of kind of, the relationship, how strong the foundations of the club are. You hear time and time again, this message from Arsenal saying we're all in this together. It's a team effort. Well, is it? It feels like the first sign of big money and a big money offer from Forest and Marinakis, and off is Edu, really. So I do think some of the coverage is a little bit, it's quite scathing, sort of the Telegraph's inside read put together by Jason Burt. It also details a hit and miss of Arsenal transfers. Some of them don't make pretty reading on sort of kind of the likes of Nicola Pepe, this sort of kind of, hit. And they sort of even say the jury's out on Jury and Timber. I'm not sure about that. But basically, there's been some good ones. There's definitely been some bad ones. But I do think it's a major blow for Arsenal, particularly at a time when they're trying to really move forward and be successful at Arteta. Big season for Arteta. He needs a trophy, in my view.
The other interpretation of it, I guess, Charlie, is that Arteta had got, as managers do, so powerful that Edu maybe didn't feel quite as important as he wanted to feel.
I think Arteta will obviously have a big say in the next appointment, won't he? And he's got that power, but equally, I understand why this is a shock to Arsenal fans, but ultimately, I think the most important thing is that they've got Mikel Arteta as manager. I think that's the key thing at the moment. Obviously, they've had a difficult couple of weeks. I agree with John. They do have to win the trophy this season. I really fancied them for the title this year. I really did. And obviously the last few results have suggested that it's going to be incredibly difficult now. But in terms of Arteta, I'm sure he'll have a say over who he's going to be working with. And that's obviously a key appointment in terms of their transfer targets next summer.
That'll keep you and John in work for a few more weeks. Always good to know. Stick around. Lots more to come in a couple of minutes' time. More of the back pages, including in The Guardian. You are a number. That human touch wasn't there with England. A candid interview with former Lionesses captain Steph Houghton, and we'll focus on the Monday night football. Wilson's speedy double denies bees at the last. This is Back Pages tonight. Regard what happened in the first 10 minutes as just a warm-up for what's still to come from the Mirror's chief football writer, John Cross, and the football editor for The Sun, Charlie White. Let's go to the Mirror next. John, your paper and the Liverpool head coach Arne Slot on Mo Salah's contract situation, and another cryptic message, this time on social media. This is going to run and run and run, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. I do think that, as time goes by, I think the stories and suspicions about Mo Salah and his future is still such an incredible player for Liverpool, a Premier League great in my view, one of the all-time great Liverpool players, and destined, for the record books, I'm sure. He posted on Saturday night after the game that basically, I'll never forget what it feels like to score at Anfield after, another incredible performance, which spearheaded Liverpool's turnaround victory against Brighton on Saturday. And look, the obvious thing is that basically his contract's up at the end of the season. There are doubts over whether he's going to sign, whether he'll get a contract that he wants, whether he wants to stay, whether he wants a new challenge, and all that into the mix. And Slot just responding to those questions today and basically saying, look, I don't need to look at social media. I speak to my players every day. And as long as he's scoring and performing like he does, I've got no worries about Salah, and he can keep going. I've got no doubts about it. But I do think, rather than kind of almost be fearful about what next for Salah and if he's leaving, it feels very much that Arne Slot is playing this brilliantly, and he's just embracing, the kind of if it is indeed Salah's last season, then basically let's embrace it and use his extra special powers. And I do think he's got superhuman powers, Mo Salah, to kind of fire Liverpool to the title. What a story that would be, for Slot to win it his first season, and potentially Salah to kind of crown everything that he's achieved with Liverpool to also win it in his last season. I'm not saying it will be. Let's hope he sort of stays on. The Premier League needs him, but it's a great story, I think.
I'm just wondering about the mechanics of this, Charlie. Let's assume it's not Mo Salah in the back of a car somewhere, posting his own message on Saturday night. Do you think he and his advisors have sat around a table and said, right, next time I score, this is the kind of message we go with?
I mean, he's been quite deliberate in the past. In various times he's given sort of interviews to Marca in Spain, even though he doesn't give sort of interviews to papers in England or in Egypt. And when he was sort of courting Real Madrid, he suddenly started speaking to Marca. None of this is an accident, and occasionally when he does sort of TV interviews, he drops hints in, doesn't he? So I think it's quite deliberate. He knows what he's doing. I felt that when Klopp announced he was going to leave last season, I thought Liverpool would do really well to keep Van Dijk and Salah this season. Van Dijk was giving some negative messages after the Euros, and Salah, I felt, might look to move then. So I think Liverpool did well to keep both of them for this season. Obviously, they've got an issue with Trent Alexander-Arnold as well. They're all out of contract in the summer. They're not all going to stay. But I think Liverpool fans around the world would be desperate for Salah to stay. And of course, so Slot. Today, he was sort of laughing when he was asked about the posts, and he basically said, "Slot, I hope he goes on Instagram after the game against Leverkusen, and I hope he goes on Instagram again on Saturday night after the match against Aston Villa." Yeah. So, as John said, I think he's taking it in his stride, Slot, and he's handling it pretty well.
Also handling it pretty well, I would suggest, is Xabi Alonso, who might have been where Arne Slot is, but was very keen to stay at Leverkusen, and up against Liverpool tomorrow night. Alonso set for Kopp's warm embrace. Stick with you, Charlie. Do you think he'll end up in charge at Anfield one day?
Well, he gave his press conference tonight, and he was asked about that. And I think you've shown the clips earlier, haven't you? And he played a straight bat and wasn't giving an awful lot away, was he? Really, he just said, "I want to talk about the game." Maybe one day he will be manager, but certainly for the time being, it's going to be Slot and how impressive he's been. But what is for certain is that tomorrow evening, when he steps out of the tunnel at Anfield, he is going to get one hell of a reception from the Liverpool fans. Obviously, a huge favourite in his 5 years at the club. He was asked about his favourite memory playing for Liverpool, and of course he gave the answer we all knew he'd give, and that was 2005 in Istanbul. But there'll be a terrific moment tomorrow night when he steps out and in the away dugout, not the home dugout, which I think a lot of Liverpool fans thought at one stage a few months ago that would be the case. Yeah, absolutely. Let's move to the Monday Night Football, which if you were in any way underwhelmed by the prospect of Brentford and Fulham, shame on you, the result of what actually happened. What a stunning end. Telegraph have it on in their supplement. There it is, and it features obviously in all the back pages as they get news and get time to process all that. And what an extraordinary finish to an extraordinary game, John, because Fulham have been battering away. Barely a shot on target from all of that, and then Harry Wilson, who hadn't scored for 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely, and preempted, of course, by Janelt's brilliant opening goal for Brentford. Having said, so much pre-match analysis about how Brentford wanted to kind of almost make their XG kind of easier, if you like, by going closer in. It was a lovely move, and then Janelt's spectacular sort of long-range shot right into the far corner. And no wonder they saw kind of the panel were in hysterics at half-time, basically, because it was completely at odds with what Thomas Frank was talking about before the game. But honestly, the way that Fulham kept going, and then Harry Wilson, his first goal was excellent. The second goal, you have to say, it does actually come off his shoulder. But my first instinct was to say, how on earth does he get that in the net? Because if you haven't seen it, it's come over from across, and he's kind of almost leant into it, improvised, and somehow hooked it into the net off his shoulder. It's a brilliant goal. And actually, I think it's his first goals for a little while, isn't it? And basically, what a response, and what a fantastic sort of kind of end to the evening. Fair play. And I just noticed as they're coming off the pitch, Thomas Frank was so sporting in his kind of congratulations for the other side as well, because it was a terrific game, and I think he could accept that basically Fulham really sort of kind of gave as good as they could possibly get, really, and a terrific game, really good advert for the Premier League. Just give me 20 seconds, Charlie, on which of those two you think is going to finish higher in the table come the end of the season.
Oh, good question. I think they're going to be very close, because that middle of that Premier League up towards about fourth place is going to be really bunched this season. You can already see that, can't you? I mean, Brentford are incredible. They've scored They've become the first Premier League team to score first in 4 successive away games and lose all of them. So on their away form at the moment, I'll probably have Fulham to finish above them.
OK, thank you for that. Thank you for your brevity. John Cross, you and I have both had a good look at an interview that Nick Ames has done with Steph Houghton in The Guardian. Some striking revelations.
Incredible. What a read. I do think it's a fantastic interview. Steph Houghton, of course, England great, talking about all manner of things, and it's such a read in its entirety. 12 years ago, get this, earning £4,000 a week. We talk about parity. She talks about the need for parity. Sorry, £4,000 a year, I should say. She talks with great affection about her husband, Stephen, and his illness. She talks about being overlooked twice by Sarina Wiegman, first time for the Euros, then for the World Cup squad, and then lacking in a human touch and really feeling kind of ostracised and isolated by Wiegman and indeed sort of kind of the England setup. It really is such a compelling, fantastic read. I think it preempts. I actually think it's done by Donna McRae, isn't it? Basically ahead of her autobiography. So it's such an impressive read. It really is. And, those interviews, look, the photography is great, very eye-catching as well. But the interview is terrific. Every single word really strikes a note on kind of so many points about the women's game, about parity, about her own emotional, sort of setup with her family. She's clearly such a loving, caring individual, and also about the game. It's an unmissable read. I think you'll struggle to find a better interview in tomorrow's papers.
Yeah, it is indeed. Don McRae, who's done that excellent interview. Does it raise some questions about Sarina Wiegman? We're learning what we seem to do from Steph Houghton, Charlie?
She feels that she wasn't maybe as warm as she could have been, Sarina Wiegman, and I think she felt, that she wasn't totally honest and was sort of strung along a little bit when she was trying to get back to fitness for both the Euros and the World Cup. So look, there's two sides to every story, isn't there? And we're hearing, from her. But yeah, I think there's some real frustration and bitterness towards the England manager there.
Fair enough. Charlie, John, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you very much indeed. John Cross of the Mirror, Charlie Wyatt of The Sun with us on Backpage tonight.